Time for my pre-fight breakdown. This time UFC 241. Probably the best card of the year. Well, certainly one of the most anticipated. The main event being the rematch between DC and Stipe Miocic. But incredible fights on this card with a lot of big names and a lot of toss-up fights to me where little tactical differences could really mean everything and really change the outcome. So really fun card to break down. Usually we have this many names. There's a bit more. It's a bit more obvious, or you can break the card down a lot easier. I like the way these are matched and that you have a lot of names, but they're really evenly matched. So let's start at the bottom. Derek Brunson versus Ian Hainish. I like Ian Hainish a lot. If you don't know his backstory, he was a drug smuggler who ended up doing time in Spain, was running from a charge in the United States, and then ended up at Rikers Island, where he almost got knifed to death. But really fascinating story. Guy's been through a lot. Taking on Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson, a vet who's fought some really great names. One of the things here to keep in mind is Ian Hainish, last couple fights, he's taken on really great jiu-jitsu guys with solid positional jiu-jitsu. And every time, Ian Hainish has been able to kind of beast his way out. Last time, there were a lot of modified Grammy rolls. If you're not a wrestling person, it's like this forward roll that he would use all the time to get out of position and really confuse a traditional jiu-jitsu guy. And he found himself in bad spots where it wasn't working out for him, and he would find an unorthodox and physical way to get out of it. The dude is just monster strong. Wrestling background, so positionally really good, but really thick, heavy 185-pounder. This is the first time in his UFC career that Ian Hainish is taking on a guy in Derek Brunson who's more known as a striker, who's more known as a knockout guy. 19 wins, 11 by knockout, only 3 submissions. He's not facing a guy who's going to try to do a lot on him positionally. Sure, he'll take it if he can get it, but more of a knockout guy, more of a rangy striker, more of an outside puncher kicker, and Ian Hainish hasn't dealt with that yet. So I'm not saying he can't deal with it, but it's the first time he's going to have to in the UFC. Also, he has a problem with pacing 15 minutes together. Ian Hainish, last time out, started a little slowly, gave up early rounds, and then had to come back. And then before that, he was winning and then had to fight a late comeback. He hasn't quite put together 3 great rounds. He's won both fights. Excellent stuff by him, but he hasn't quite figured out his pacing yet. Hasn't put together 15 dominant minutes. He's faced tough guys. It's hard to put together 15 dominant minutes. But Derek Brunson has been through more with tougher talent. His losses, Israel Adesanya, Jacare, Anderson Silva, Robert Whittaker, Yoel Romero, those are all his losses in the UFC. So he's only lost to high-level championship guys. Now, is the best win of his career, knockout over Lyoto Machida. That's the biggest name. Obviously, went over Uriah Hall. He's tough. But it's that the guys who have beaten him have been really top-level guys. And so it's a test for Ian Hainish in that if you can win, can you put yourself in that class of fighter? Now, Derek Brunson, of course, as I said, more of a knockout guy, rangy striker. Ian Hainish has to switch gears and face a different kind of guy. And Derek Brunson went over Elias Theodorou, of course, by decision, but Elias Theodorou, a tricky guy. It's hard to find advantages against him, known for being able to pace a fight his way, and Derek Brunson didn't fight for any of that. Derek Brunson didn't fall for any of that. So what does that say? He's a smart guy. Smart guy. He picks the right strategy at the right time. The only guys to figure out way to beat him are the elite of the elite. Is Ian Hainish among those? A lot of questions in this fight. So if Ian Hainish can't keep the fight close, in terms of physically close, make it a clinch, dirty, wrestling-centric kind of game, Derek Brunson might pick him apart from the outside. And he has the smarts and the footwork to keep Ian Hainish at distance, where he's considerably less effective. So that's going to be an amazing fight to kick things off. Gabriel Benitez versus Sodiq Yusuff. I don't want to say striker versus grappler. That's just, that language doesn't really exist today in modern MMA for the most part. But Gabriel Benitez, the last fight, I called his fight. He won by slam over Bandanai. That was on the Maia versus Usman card in Buenos Aires. Problem is, that was a 39-second fight that he won by slam. Didn't teach us a whole lot. Went over Jason Knight. Hasn't beaten any big names. And the biggest name to beat him, Andre Fili, who's doing well right now. But both guys kind of at the middle of the pack, but for different reasons. Meaning, he's well-rounded, 10 wins by submission, 7 by knockout. He can do it both ways, but generally a submission guy. He likes the scrambles, good front chokes. He catches you in transition, and you leave something behind, and he snatches up and submits you. That's generally his game. Sodiq Yusuff has never won by submission. All his finishes are by knockout. Once again, another guy who is just coming into his own in the UFC, hasn't faced any great names, but I like his boxing. I like his hands. I like his footwork. I like his combinations. Just the fight I just broke down, it's one of those almost more of a submission guy who's great in transition versus that outside striker who, once he starts picking you apart and finding his rhythm and getting his combinations going, Sodiq Yusuff's tough. Very tough on the feet. So it comes down to, once again, kind of who keeps the fight in their wheelhouse. So the opening 2 fights are guys looking to establish themselves in their weight classes and are facing stylistically very, very different opponents. These two guys, in both of the opening fights, it's style versus style a little bit, where we know what they do well and it's very different than what their opponent does well. So it's about who establishes the range and timing. That's generally what these kinds of fights break down to. Then, the top 3, we get into the big names. Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. Both guys incredibly strong, but they bring totally different styles. Yoel Romero is like a grab bag of explosive talent, meaning you never know exactly what you're going to get and when you're going to get it. Yoel Romero, I call this fight against Robert Whittaker in Chicago, and it almost looked like he was giving away rounds, where he would kind of be sleepwalking, and Whittaker would have the timing and was kind of putting it on him, and you go, okay, well, he's kind of giving up this round, and then boom, he would explode and do something crazy and almost knock Whittaker out. It's hard to find 2.5 minutes in a row where Yoel Romero does anything consistently. Meaning he could be sleepwalking for 1.5 minutes and then explode and destroy you in the last minute. He can look great for a minute and then suddenly slow down because he runs out of energy, and then he's got to regroup. And it's in rounds he's inconsistent. Rounds and fights he's inconsistent. His fight against Jacare, he was putting it on Jacare in the first round, and what happened? Jacare started coming back. I thought Jacare won that fight. They gave it to Yoel Romero, but very close fight. My point is, it's easy to take rounds away from him because he's like a race car where he slams the pedal down and he goes 120 miles an hour, and then he has to coast, and then the gas tank fills up again and he goes again. It's really inconsistent, just the way he fights. And part of it is his build. The guy is all muscle, and he just can't keep a consistent rhythm for 15 minutes, for 25 minutes. Remember, he's been in a lot of championship fights. So, not a lot, but a couple. So, it's one of those things where he's always, I think, thinking about, do I have the gas to pull this off? And then he does something crazy because he has amazing physical talent. He finishes a lot of fighters. But he almost never fights consistently for 5 straight minutes. So when it comes to rounds, it's always, well, he exploded and did this, but the next 3.5 minutes, the guy put the pressure on him and landed good strikes. Who do you give the round to? A lot of interpretation in those. And that's kind of been the difficulty with Yoel Romero, in that when he explodes and knocks you out, you get those Chris Weidman moments where it's boom, and he flying knees and knocks out Chris Weidman. Unbelievable stuff. The Luke Rockhold knockout, incredible. But then guys like Robert Whittaker that are very, very tough to finish, you get into these situations where Yoel Romero has trouble putting together enough rounds to beat fighters who aren't caught by his explosions, who aren't knocked out by that beautiful left hand or flying knee or whatever he throws. So that's been the problem in his career, is that inconsistency in rounds and in fights. In Paulo Costa, who's fighting on Saturday, he's fighting a guy who's almost the exact opposite. Both guys are strong and physical. They're all muscle. But Paulo Costa brings physical pressure. He's always stalking forward, throws big punches, doesn't do anything crazy. You won't see a lot of spinning, flying stuff. Nice hands, strong as an ox, always walking forward, good combinations. I like the way he works the body. But let's look at his last couple fights. Those are the 2 biggest names of his career. Last time Paulo Costa came out, it was against Uriah Hall and Johnny Hendricks. 2 biggest names of his career. When you look at these fights, a couple things spring to mind. Number one, he's always taking out real estate, meaning he's always moving forward. He makes you fight in a very small octagon. He's very good at taking away the space for anyone. That's important for someone like Yoel Romero, who likes a lot of explosive stuff. And, to always keep him backpedaling, it's going to be hard for him to pull stuff like that off. But you don't want to walk in anything if you're Costa. Against a guy who's explosive and hit you from anywhere, if you just walk forward stalking him down, you move right into a shot if you're not careful. So if you look at the Johnny Hendricks and Uriah Hall fights, two things that stand out to me. Like I said, he always takes the real estate. He's always moving forward. But against both Uriah Hall and Johnny Hendricks, didn't go past the midpoint of the second round. So can he put it on any opponent for 15 minutes? Can he win a long fight, a long, difficult fight? Remember, Romero's tough to finish. So does he have the gas to fight a hard 15 minutes with his build? Usually guys with his build can't. But when I saw these fights, usually you see a drop after round one. For someone who's having gas trouble, it usually doesn't start in round three. It usually starts in round two. He can get really bad in round three, but you usually see the wave kind of crest in round two. I didn't see that. I didn't see at the end of round one, boy, Paulo Costa's output really dwindled. Man, he threw fewer punches. He really seemed exhausted. I didn't see that. Sure, it only went the midway through round two, so we don't know, but I didn't see the drop-off you usually see after round one for an explosive fighter. So Paulo Costa has shown so far an ability to pace himself well. Decent defense, but in both Johnny Hendricks and Uriah Hall, I don't think he thought he was facing someone who had the explosive power of a Yoel Romero. Now, Johnny Hendricks can hit, has a good left hand, but wasn't a big middleweight. Uriah Hall, technical, slick, good accuracy, very unorthodox, but not necessarily a heavy-handed kind of guy where Paulo Costa had a reason to think, man, I better watch it as I move forward. Yoel Romero, he has to be careful moving forward, and he hasn't faced that kind of trap opponent, meaning somebody who I'm coming forward, putting pressure, and then bam, they hit me with something crazy that I wasn't ready for. He's powerful and explosive and can knock me out. Uriah Hall a bit, but he's more of an accuracy guy, and I think with Paulo Costa walking him down, Uriah Hall didn't have the chance to get the footwork he likes to set up his big, accurate knockout shots. So a new opponent for Costa, someone he hasn't really faced before. So this is incredibly interesting. If it weren't for Diaz versus Pettis, this would be the people's main event. But it's not, because I think that right now that belongs to Diaz-Pettis. But this is going to be an amazing fight, and it's going to teach us a lot about both guys. Can Paulo Costa put physical pressure on Yoel Romero for 15 minutes to get his game off enough to win the fight? And can Yoel Romero find those countering opportunities with the big knees, the big shots, the explosive attacks that have won him fights in the past? It's going to be very, very interesting. Once again, a contrast in styles, and I love seeing that. So the next one is Anthony Pettis, Nate Diaz. So this is going to be an incredibly entertaining fight, I think. The things to keep in mind. Pettis doesn't do well. Pettis doesn't do well, generally speaking, with physical pressure. With someone who walks forward and takes the octagon away from him and puts it on him. He doesn't do well moving backward. That hasn't been what he's great at, and that's what Nate Diaz does very, very well. He moves forward and makes you move backward and makes you deal with his pressure before you can get your offense going. Now, we saw it against Tony Ferguson. We saw it against Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway, the pressure guys who always march forward behind nice hands, which is what Diaz has, and rangy punches, especially in the case of Ferguson and Holloway. He hasn't dealt with that well so far. That's what Pettis has problems with. If you give him the space to get his spinning stuff going and feel confident on the feet, that's when he gets you. But when he's always having to move back and time his shots in that regard, he hasn't been good with that. And the fighters with the style of Nate Diaz have been the kryptonite of Pettis so far. So far in his career. I would say Holloway fights kind of like him. Ferguson fights kind of like him, at least on the feet. Even Poirier, who's a bit harder of a puncher, though, a bit more of a classical boxer, does put physical pressure, much like Nate Diaz does. But, man, when he gets it going, like he did against Stephen Thompson, like he did against Michael Chiesa, when he's confident, and he still has knockout power, he still has finishing ability on the ground. I don't think he catches Diaz on the ground. I just don't see that happening. But we saw against Stephen Thompson, who's a big natural 170, who he laid out, he still has knockout power. Now, his issue has been consistency. He hasn't won back-to-back fights since the Henderson and Melendez fights. It's a long time. It's a long time. That was 2014 since he's won back-to-back fights. And, of course, he's coming off a win against Stephen Thompson. I don't really believe in that kind of, hey, look at he's never won back-to-back fights. He's got to win back-to-back fights now. I don't necessarily believe that. My point is he's had trouble with consistency in fights since he lost the title to Dos Anjos. It's really been a slide in terms of his record. But the X factors with Diaz is He's had 3 damn years off. That is huge. Hasn't fought since the loss to Conor McGregor. And before that, now Diaz is incredibly popular. He's an emotional favorite to a lot of fans. People just absolutely love this guy. They love the Diaz brothers and their attitude and their, fuck you demeanor. They absolutely love that. But he's, since the start of his UFC career, has been a win some, lose some kind of guy. Longest week streak, I can speak. His longest win streak is 5. And that was in the beginning of his career. Since he's moved up in talent, he hasn't had a 3-fight win streak since 2011, 2012. So that's an issue for him, is once again, much like Pettis, has been consistency in his career between fights, where he'll look great in one fight, and then a lot of times he'll run into a wrestler and look bad. The only guy to really stand his ground with him striking-wise at 155 pounds to do well against him was Conor McGregor. And of course, I was at 170, but he's a natural 55er. The key to beating Diaz so far in his career, it's been wrestlers. Wrestlers have been the ones that have beaten him. Rafael dos Anjos. Now, of course, Josh Thompson knocked him out, but Benson Henderson, Gray Maynard, Joe Stevenson, Clay Guida, the wrestlers, the ones that take him down, negate his striking game and negate his jiu-jitsu game, are the ones who usually find success against him. Usually the ones who stand and bang with him don't find success. Of course, Conor McGregor did, Josh Thompson did, but it's pretty rare. Usually the ones that stand and bang with him, he destroyed Cowboy, if you remember that fight. So even well-rounded strikers with a lot of talent run into Nate Diaz and have trouble. Their style is awkward, and I mean both Diaz brothers have an awkward style, very rangy style, a volume style, just hard to deal with. So this is going to be an amazing fight, but if Diaz can control the real estate and keep the pressure on and keep it at punching range, I think he has a very good chance. The problem is Pettis is an amazing kicker. Real versatility with his kicks, real accuracy with it, has great power. So at kicking range, if Pettis can keep that, he's got a good chance. I don't think either guy is going to take this to the ground. If anyone does, it's more than likely Diaz. I don't see Diaz doing that, but maybe if he gets in trouble, he'll take him down. We did see him go to that clinch game a little bit with Conor McGregor, but he's generally not a takedown guy. Has great jiu-jitsu, but so does Pettis. So I think I think Diaz has better jiu-jitsu than Pettis, but Pettis has excellent submission skills. So I don't see either guy trying to win this on the ground necessarily. I think it's going to be a stand-up battle, and it's about who is moving forward and who isn't. That's going to decide this one, in my opinion. Also, Diaz relies a lot on his ability to take a shot. Both Diaz brothers do. They walk forward, hands up, hands very loose, and it's their ability to read punches. So I'm at a distance, but I can see your punches coming. And his chin. He relies a lot on his ability to take a shot. Both Diaz brothers have great chin. So the problem is Anthony Pettis can put you out with one shot, especially a kick. So if I'm Diaz, I'm trying not to rely on my chin as much with this. So the real question is, how is Diaz's timing after a 3-year layoff? If his timing is good and his confidence is there and he moves forward well, he should have a good night. Now, Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. This fight, a lot on the line in terms of legacy. If DC, of course, John Jones waiting in the wings. We all know about that. If DC wins this, and I was on SiriusXM yesterday talking about this, if DC wins this fight, his overall GOAT status, I don't think it makes him the all-time greatest heavyweight of all time. People could make that argument. I still think it's Fedor, Stipe, Daniel Cormier probably. Maybe Minotauro in there. But if he beats Stipe, what he accomplished at 205 in heavyweight, his all-time pound-for-pound GOAT status, much more secure. Much more secure. Not the GOAT, but up in that conversation is what I mean. On the Mount Rushmore of MMA. If he beats Stipe, I think he's on the Mount Rushmore of MMA. If Stipe beats him, it really muddies the water in that at 205 he was second to John Jones. At heavyweight he won the title but couldn't defend it. I mean couldn't defend it against the former champ Stipe. Couldn't win a rematch with him. So it's one of those things where not the best at 205 and not the best at heavyweight. So is he an all-time great? Sure. On the Mount Rushmore? Maybe not. If he beats Stipe, definitely on the Mount Rushmore. If he beats John Jones at a rematch, he could be number 1 on the Mount Rushmore. That would be amazing. So a lot waiting in the wings, but I think a lot on the line just for this fight in terms of legacy. Stipe Miocic is right now, to me, the greatest heavyweight in UFC history is Stipe. I put him number 2 all-time heavyweight behind Fedor, but I think Stipe is the greatest heavyweight in UFC history. His title run from his loss to Junior Dos Santos to his loss to DC, the bookends of that run, he beat Mark Hunt, Andre Arlovski, Fabricio Verdum, Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos, Francis Ngannou. That's a great all-time list. And then went over Gonzaga before that, Roy Nelson. The guy that run itself, to me, qualifies him as an all-time great. Right now, the all-time great in the UFC, number 2 all-time. So, the difference is in this fight this time around. I think the first time around, Stipe really didn't believe in the power of Daniel Cormier. He had to worry about the takedown. I don't think he was worried about a one-shot knockout. I'm a natural heavyweight. I'm naturally bigger. This is my division. You're coming up to me. Daniel Cormier, not known as a one-shot knockout guy his entire career. So I think Stipe came in, I don't want to say cocky, but not concerned about the power of Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier knocking him out, now Stipe is concerned about it. I think Stipe comes in with a different game plan, with a lot more respect in this one. I think he understands what Daniel Cormier can do at heavyweight. Daniel Cormier has not yet lost a round at heavyweight. The closest he came was the first round against Stipe. It had that round finished, but it didn't. So what's very interesting to me is the adjustments Stipe Miocic makes in the rematch, where I know this guy can knock me out. I can't play games with this guy. I have to worry about his power, not just his wrestling. Stipe knows he's facing a guy with a complete game at heavyweight. I think the first time around, he thought he was just facing a wrestler with decent submission skills and good ground and pound. Now he knows he's facing a guy that can clip him. That changes everything. Daniel Cormier, an all-around great, always had the wrestling in his back pocket. That's been the key to his success his entire career. As push comes to shove, I can take you down. The only person he couldn't was John Jones, and John Jones was the only guy to beat him. So that's the thing to me is Daniel Cormier has always had the wrestling in his back pocket. If things get dicey, if I eat a big shot, Rumble Johnson lays one on me, I'll take him down. Make it about my heart, my cardio, my wrestling, my top pressure. He's always had that in his back pocket. What I'm curious about is, does he have that in his back pocket against Stipe Miocic? I think he probably does. Now, Stipe does have a wrestling background, but Daniel Cormier, man, is a level better in terms of his wrestling. So what I think we're going to see in this rematch that we didn't see a lot of in the first fight is Daniel Cormier wrestling. Stipe Miocic respectful of the power of Daniel Cormier. So I think Stipe is going to make adjustments, and as a result, Cormier is going to make adjustments. I don't think Cormier thinks he's going to catch Stipe sleeping on his power again. I think Daniel Cormier comes in with a wrestling-centric game, a lot of top pressure, very, very heavy, and Stipe Miocic has to be ready for that takedown game. Has to be extremely prepared for it. He's going to be ready for the hands because he's not getting caught twice. So I think he's going to be ready for a knockout punch, but I think Daniel Cormier switches gears in this one. Okay, I knocked you out the first time. You're ready for that. I'm gonna be the wrestler. I'm gonna gas you out. I'm gonna wear you down. Embrace the grind. Keep the pressure on you. See if you can handle the fire I bring for 25 minutes. So I think stylistically, we're gonna get a very, very different fight. But it's gonna be a great card. Also, I'm doing the post-fight show for SiriusXM Saturday, 1 in the morning to 3 in the morning. Always a tough shift, but I would appreciate anybody calling in to the show and chat with me, man, because a lot of times I'm on there till 3 a.m., and it's great having callers. So if you have access to SiriusXM, it's going to be me and RJ Clifford post-fight. So afterward, give us a ring, call in, chit-chat a little bit. It's always fun. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon.